Well, this is Dave Gaddis, and today is November 3rd, 2016, and we're interviewing Julianne Rankin, who's the Director of Planning in McAllen. So welcome, Julie.
Thank you.
And so let's start at the beginning and tell us when and where you were born.
Okay. Well, I was born in Weslaco, Texas, which is next to my hometown, Donna, Texas, because Weslaco had the hospital. Donna didn't, in December. Okay. So that's good enough for you to know at this point.
And so did you live, well, first of all, what did your parents do that they were in Weslaco?
That they were in Donna? Mm-hmm. My dad was in the produce business, and my mother was an educator. She taught school for many years and was in administration. And they moved to what we call the Rio Grande Valley from Ohio. My dad was he was a major in the Army in World War II, and he was stationed for a little while in the Austin area. And my parents liked Texas because Ohio was very cold. They thought, hey, let's, after the war. But before that, my dad worked for a company called Myers Pumps and Sprayers, and he was going to come to South Texas, which was a very big agricultural area, and sell pumps and sprayers in the agricultural industry. And he didn't do that for very long. He got into the produce business himself and became a produce broker. And my mother went back to teaching school, and so I was born there.
Live in Donna, your parents?
I did.
Go to high school down there?
I did. I graduated from high school in Donna.
Okay.
And I played the flute in the band. I sang in the choir and danced and did 4-H and Girl Scouts and things like that that you do in a small town, and enjoyed it a great deal.
So did you go directly to college from there?
I did.
And where did you go from there?
Well, I went to it's now called the University of North Texas. It was North Texas State at the time. And I was a music major. I was going to be a music major, and I studied voice, and I sang there, and music theory and all those things. And my parents were musicians on the side of all the other things they did. My dad had a dance band, and my mom played the piano and sang. So I have I have a gene for it, I guess, but not so much a gene and drive to actually go into the field. I went home to Donna in the summer. A lot of my friends were home saying, well, we can go to, at the time it was Pan American University. Now, in the recent years, it's University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. But it was Pan American University, and everybody was taking summer classes and transferring back to wherever it is that they were going to school. And so I said, well, I could do that. I took an English class and a government class. And I really got hooked on the government side. The instructor there was chairman of the department, and he talked to me about the honors program. So I got into the honors program at Pan Am, stayed there, and the next year he invited me into something called it was an urban studies program. It was that old 701 HUD planning deal where the COG there got a grant. They partnered, Lower Rio Grande Valley Development Council, they partnered with Pan Am, and we had a class with some circuit riding city managers, ICMA people that came to speak, and then we could intern. And I worked for the city of FAR. I worked for the city manager, who was Ted Willis at the time, and Ted left. You probably know Ted. He left and went to TML and then other places after that. I think somebody told me that he retired in Lubbock, or he went to Lubbock for a time. And after that, when he left during the end of my first semester. And so I moved to the planning department, and the city planner was Alan Taylor. And Alan now has been an attorney for many years, but he worked for the city of FAR, and I interned for him. And when I graduated, before I graduated, that professor that was influencing everyone either to go into some form of government or law school, and I wasn't that interested in law school, so I said, well, I like planning a lot. I like the city. I'm interested in that. We traveled a lot when I was a kid because my mom was off from teaching school, and we traveled between Texas and Ohio, a lot of different directions, kind of by way of the East Coast and by way of the Midwest and by way of Colorado and Arkansas and all over the place. And my parents were always pointing out things. They always pointed out, my mom in particular, we'd go through a small city and the highway system wasn't what it is today. I mean, think of that 50 years ago. And wow, there'd be a sign and she'd point to the sign. She'd say, see that sign? It says public water supply approved. Well, don't ever drink water in town that doesn't have that sign. And things like that. And the roadways, we get lost. We got lost once in Tennessee, and we got lost in Cincinnati once, just round and round and round for an hour. I said, why don't they have better roadway markings? Why don't they have better? And it was just interesting. And the side trips we took, we went to Chicago. And when you're a little kid and you see Chicago from Donna, we had 1 2-story building in our town, and the church was big. So it was just really great.
So what was the name of the professor that got so much influence on you?
Jerry Paulinard.
Okay.
And he's still there. He's probably close to retiring. And but he taught government, just government classes, not political theory but politics. He taught politics classes. So.
And so your degree is in?
My BA is in government, and I have a minor in sociology.
Okay.
And I went to UT,
okay,
to the planning program.
And why did you pick UT?
Well, that's an interesting story too. Because I wanted to go to the planning program. I wanted to stay in Texas. Some of my friends went away, not in the planning program, but they went away to school, out of state, out of state. And well, I was accepted by both schools, A&M and UT. And I went to A&M, and I was very interested in what I would call social policy at the time. I mean, that's the end of the war on poverty programs, and a lot of coming into through community development, the block grants, and I was very interested in that more so than the physical development. But A&M didn't have that type of program. Their program was much more physical development. I was interested there because the people who ran that 701 intern program, Erin and Wiley Lamb, Wiley Lamb, she worked at the COG, and they both had their advanced degrees from A&M, PhDs. Erin worked for the City of Edinburgh in the Model Cities program, so we had a lot of connection with the City of Farr, City of McAllen, City of Edinburgh. And then the same day, after having spent a long time with Wolfgang Roessler and David Pugh, and I adore David. I adore David, but it just wasn't the program. I was interested in the social program. So I drove over to Austin, and I met with the chairman of the department there, Terry Kahn. He recently retired, I think, a year or 2 ago. And he had on these shorts. I had an appointment with him. He had on these shorts and this hat that said, I'd rather be fishing. And he was just like real relaxed. And he said, yeah, let me introduce you to Jim Hartling. Had come from Philadelphia, and he was going to be teaching the social policy class. Sandy Rosenblum, she went back. She was from Arizona. She went back to Arizona. I don't know where she is now. But she was very involved in transportation and public access, and so I met them, and Peter Coltman. I think Peter passed away not too long ago, but he was all about the environment and the relationship between development and environments, and I said, oh, this is the place for me. I just think it's wonderful. So I went to the program.
Ken Butler there when you were there, or did he come after?
He came after. I was acquainted with him, but he came after. Yeah.
Remember some of the students that you?
Ray Quay stands out because he was in my class, and he's in Arizona doing something great now with I think the University of Arizona. Dale Brown, and Dale's with. He went into city management. Dale went into city management. David Garcia, Sally Victor. Sally did historic preservation. She was very involved with historic preservation, and I used to run into her every now and then when I was doing historic preservation things for the city. But and I'm trying to think if there was. I'm sure there were other. Rob Balin, he's in California someplace. There was another guy named Bob Peters who went on for a PhD. I lost track of him.
Okay.
So.
And so what year did you finish your master's?
Oh, you want me to tell you that too?
I want to do the math.
All right, 1978.
Okay. And so you have this newly minted planning degree. Where did you go?
Well, that's kind of funny too. When I went to UT, they had it was like a work study, but they called it an urban internship too. And I went to work for what was then. See, everything has changed. You know, you're in the business 40 years and everything changes, but Texas Department of Human Resources is now, I don't even know what it's called anymore. It's broken up in different names. But I went to work for the Office of Plan Coordination for a man named E.G. Dufour, and his nickname was Doots. And I was assigned to him I did research on the impact of the state's programs, the Title VII nutrition program funding, et cetera. And there was an agency that the state funded originally through the COG, but then it was a spinoff agency called Amigos del Valle, and it was a Title VII nutrition program. And they were doing some neat stuff. They bought old school buses and painted them, and they drive around and pick up the elderly folk and take them to the places for the noon meal, and then they'd have some activities with them, and take them back, and it was kind of, it sounded like a babysitting program for the day, but it really wasn't. It grew into something pretty great in my view. But I sat there, and they would come in for monitoring visits, and I would visit with those folks. And in Sandy's class, and another professor, Jim Ortner, transportation planning, I did a paper on paratransit, and I said, oh, I know a source for that. And so I went home and I visited their agency and learned all about how they operated their system and how they got their buses going and funding and all that. And then when I got to know people there, and a woman in particular who was the HR, she was an HR clerk and then became the HR director, but she and I became good friends, and we're still good friends actually from that time frame. But when I graduated, I spent like 3 weeks looking for a job. Oh, I want to stay in Austin. I want to stay in Austin. And I love Austin. Everybody loved Austin. But I wasn't in the tech industry, which was really big. All the MBAs were getting handed big letters, and I was knocking on doors still. But I said, well, I'm going to go home for a little while and then hit it later. And so I went home, and I decided to go see my acquaintance. And she told me, oh, guess what? We have a planner position open. I said, are you kidding? You invented that. And she said, no, really. So I went to speak to the agency head, and he offered me a job. I said, let me think about that, because I want to go back to Austin. And I thought about it over the weekend, which was the July 4th weekend, and I called him on July 5th, and he said, okay, can you come in? And I started working there. I did grants. I did rural development research, and we opened 4 new centers. And the really great thing about Amigos is because Amigos del Valle, you could do a lot of things. I went to Washington an awful lot and knocked on doors for grants. And you think, okay, like who sends the kid to do that? And because I wasn't really immature in the field, but I had a lot of enthusiasm, and I just knocked on doors and looked for money and spun off into lots of different programs. And
so why did you leave?
Well, a job opened up with the city of McAllen, and I had visited the city of McAllen when I first got out of school, before I went on my big job search. And I met Mike Blum. That name pops up, I'm sure, through McAllen history. But I met Mike Blum, and he said, well, we have no positions right now, but you could check back with us later. And where's that you went to school? And I said, well, I graduated from the University of Texas with a community regional planning degree. He just kind of went, okay. as the good Aggie he is.
Yeah.
But then a position did open up in the department. I thought, I'm going to apply for that. I have a city planning degree, but I really have enjoyed Amigos, and it is social, and I've connected with the CDBG program, and we had a senior center in McAllen. I thought, there's some other things that I can do there, so I was hired there.
So what did you do in your first job at McAllen?
I don't remember. Well, I was hired as assistant director, and I was there 3 or 4 months, and the director quit. She quit, and she moved on to go to graduate school.
Who was that?
Rosemary Newsom.
Okay.
And so we were in chaos a bit, but we regrouped rather quickly, and not too long after that, the man who ran the COG, the planning department in the COG, was hired as the planning director, Ken Jones. And he was there for, I want to say, 3 or 4 years. And then he left, and I was made acting director. But during that time, I think it was that time, or maybe a little bit after that, there were a lot of, it was new. You know, we did the comprehensive plan, we updated the comprehensive plan, that's an interesting story in itself, because we went out for proposals for consulting assistance, and Fries and Nichols was selected, and the principal planner for that was Craig Farmer. And Craig Farmer used to be planning director for McAllen, so we all thought that was cool. But kind of in the middle of the project, Craig got a job someplace else, and he left Fries and Nichols. So we finished that ourselves. Fries and Nichols did send us a couple of people over time. Mel Lockement, who was an architect, who was helping us with the code, and Alan Effersey, who was helping us with the rest of the plan. And Alan became a good friend and mentor over the years. I'm very fond of him, and he was kind of a go-to person if I had a political question or something that came up, and he was always very kind to talk with me, and our paths crossed over time. But we finished the plan and submitted it for an award, and we got a recognition, a merit award for that plan, and I think I recall the response to that was, well, it was good, it looked so homemade. I said, well, it was homemade. But there were some other things that we did. The staff was young and dynamic, and just like, well, what if we did this? What if we did this? And we had the Community Development Block Grant Program. We had a fairly large entitlement that we were doing utilities with, water and sewer. And there was a program that it was really a grassroots citizen effort. And some business folk got together, and they funded a housing rehabilitation program called McAllen Housing Services Incorporated. And they were doing rehab. Well, Amigos Del Valle had been doing rehab. And when I was there, we would sit around and say, well, what if we did this and what if we did that? And then we discovered there was, because most of what our, I'm going to say employees or staff, because we got a grant that was kind of a self-help grant where the elderly people would actually work on the homes, and they would work on homes of the participants through this grant, and it all seemed to work together very well. But a lot of times we were left with just maybe the boards and the porch, because these folks were really destitute and really needed assistance. So that was a good program. And then just to reflect on that for a second, we also won a HUD 202 project, the Housing and Urban Development, Elderly and Handicapped Housing. And when I was at Amigos Del Valle, we secured the land, and we got the contracts. The city of Brownsville worked with us, and it became Casa de Amigos #1. So it was all those things, and then I left. But with the city, the man who worked with us running the Community Development Block Grant was Joe Sines. He left the city for a while, went to work for the state, and then he came back and managed the McAllen Housing Authority, but he's since passed on. We were sitting around one day saying, well, what if, what if, what if? And in our region at the time, there were a lot of land sales contract for deed. And there'd be big signs up in Spanish that, you know, $100 down, $100 a month. We had people paying on their lots for a really, really long time. And we said, well, what if they owned their lot? Could we help them actually build a house? So we came up with that idea and went to McAllen Housing Services, and it became that if they owed $2,000 or less on their lot, then they could use the lot for the loan. The loan ended up being 5% guaranteed through McAllen Housing Services, and then became McAllen Affordable Housing. They incorporated a new agency. And we had a guy on our staff, engineer, and we designed the house. And that was pretty cool. Kambis Kademi was his name. He does engineering work. Hasn't been with the city for many years, but we came up with that, and the city commission agreed to support all that. They didn't require permit fees. They didn't require utility connection fees, all to kind of jumpstart that. And that's in effect today. That's still in effect today. We don't require utility connection fees or permit fees for affordable homes. They've since grown, and they've reincorporated themselves again into Affordable Homes of South Texas. During that early time period, they did a subdivision called, I think it was called Los Encinos. The Oaks or Los Encinos. And they've done several subdivisions since in McAllen and other cities. So it was good to be just right there with the idea, like the birth of the idea, and then just kind of be a catalyst to keep going and going and going and saying, what if we do this? What if we do this? What if we did this? So that was something that I was happy with that.
So you started in McAllen in 1981, and you've been there ever since?
Yes, yes.
That's an unusual,
January 5th, 1981.
An unusually long tenure.
It is.
For a planning director.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the other big projects that you're proud of that you've accomplished?
I think the economic development program, I'm not going to take all the credit for what it is today, but we didn't have one. We had an industrial foundation, and through the industrial foundation, the city bought land and installed infrastructure to be available for businesses and manufacturing. And that was a pretty active program, and they were housed in the Chamber of Commerce. And again, through my Amigos del Valle grant days, I was always looking. There was no computer, you know, you couldn't Google anything, so you could go to the library and look at the Federal Register. What's available? What's come out? You know, Department of Labor stuff and HUD stuff and EDA. And I was like, oh, here's a planning grant. There's a planning grant, $50,000 planning grant. That was pretty big dough back then. And we hired somebody to work with us on staff to work on the research for that, and actually put together the first plan, and the city commission adopted it. And it had stuff in like create a development agency and just all kinds of little tidbits of fun things that eventually got implemented. So that was a pretty exciting thing. And as part of that, we had Foreign Trade Zone number 12, but through the Industrial Foundation of the Foreign Trade Zone, we were connected with an organization called WEPSA, World Export Processing Zones Association. And WEPSA had a big membership to move into international trade and the Maquiladora program, which is the value added, where in Mexico there'd be some plants, and on the U.S. side there'd be some means of production, and the product would come in bond to the trade zone, and there'd be some value added, go back to Mexico and ship out someplace else without paying duties. And I got to go to their conference and make a presentation about McAllen's program, and it was in Colombia. So that's why I say, in those early years, there was a lot of, oh, do you want to do this? Sure, I'd love to do that. Or, hey, can I do that? And we had a very supportive, business-oriented city. And they were like, yeah, we can grow that, we can do that. So that was a fun thing. Those were interesting times.
So I'm sure the city has changed a lot since 1981.
It has.
What kinds of changes have come about?
Well, we're bigger. We've annexed and annexed. We've had a steady growth, which is good. Some cities, they always talk about sprawl and leapfrog. McAllen's had a steady growth for many years. There have been little dips, but at least 2%, 2 to 3%, just steady. And so we've been able to go from the city center out to where we bump up against City of FAR on the east, City Mission on the west, Edinburgh on the north, and Hidalgo on the south. And we have agreements with them for that expansion, but we have sort of a long corridor that goes way out north where we've recently annexed 2,700 acres with a planned development, the biggest one that we've had. And it's going to have 100 acres devoted to Texas A&M University campus. We also have part of the UT RGV research campus in McAllen, which is something, this has all been in the last 5 to 6 years. Prior to that, we had the establishment of South Texas College, which the city owned acreage. I was involved in that, citing that, working with the Chamber of Commerce. Charles Wilson was his name. He was the county health director, and he was a city council member for a little while, city commissioner. And he was involved in an organization called Leadership McAllen that I was involved with. And he just had ideas, and we got together with ideas, and the city agreed to provide the acreage. TSTI, Texas State Technical Institute, came over, and then shortly thereafter became South Texas State Technical College. Now it's South Texas College. So we have a grow your own school, grow your own college, ultimately university.
And I recall you've done some stuff with the convention and hotels development.
Well, yes. Not as much as I think I would like to have on the layout or the site planning, but that was pretty much 4 or 5 different plans early on that I worked on under previous administrations. You mentioned me being there a long time. The mayor.
I was also going to ask you about politics. So
oh, yeah. I'll go there and then I'll come back. I'll serpentine over there. The man who was mayor when I was hired was. We have a council manager form of government, but he was a very strong mayor, and very outspoken, and very charismatic. A very charismatic individual. And
his name?
Othel Brand. And he had a big business empire, produce business, as I mentioned, practically everything was back in the day. A big produce business, and he was very direct with the staff, and there were a number of people that were hired over time that just left because he was kind of a difficult person, especially at the city commission meetings. And I do remember, I can't tell you this. I do remember we have a conditional use process for bars. They're not by right in a commercial zone. They're conditional with certain requirements. And there was an establishment that was outside of town, outside the city limits, and it was not licensed. It was kind of a risque place. And the city annexed it, and it closed. The city didn't, it just closed on its own, as far as I know. It closed. And a year or 2 later, someone bought it and wanted to open a new establishment, and so they applied for the conditional use permit, the typical conditional use permit process. Public hearing, went to the Planning and Zoning Commission, et cetera, and back at that time frame, it was approved only at the board level, not city commission. And he was very unhappy that that had been approved. So he called me to his office. And he told me that I single-handedly had destroyed everything he'd worked for in this town to keep that element out. And I never felt so emotional in my life. I was just standing there thinking, what can I say? And it just popped out of my mouth, well, Mayor, I never meant to do that. And actually, there are 7 people who approved that, and they're called the Planning and Zoning Commission that you appointed. So what would you like to have us do? He said, I'll take care of that. And I left. And the city police chief and the mayor and the fire chief visited the establishment while it was under construction, and eventually, I think they closed. They just never opened. They never opened. So, but he would get things done that way, and he would say things to us directly, and a few times that my predecessor had a run-in with him, and I think that's why she left. She just quit. She said, I'm not doing this anymore. But I do recall after that a couple of times that he was upset about certain things in planning. When we were working on updating the comp plan again, it never had an environmental element in it. And we worked very hard to have a very exacting environmental chapter. And we went to a workshop to present the various elements. And he told me he'd been studying the plan, and he wanted to know why that was in there, because all we had was thorny brush. And he was very dramatic, and he ripped it out of the comb-bound thing and crumpled it up and threw it over his head. I guess it doesn't have an environmental component in it. Okay. And so it was those kinds of things that you, after a while, you know, you could work back in. And I do recall one time he told me at a city commission meeting, well, you know, you and I disagree. Yes, Mayor, I know. And you know, I think you're wrong. Yes, Mayor, I know that too. All right, then. Thank you, Mayor. I'd sit down and that would be it. But you had to know your stuff. You had to know your stuff.
And he was mayor for quite a while.
He was mayor for a very long time. And Leo Montalvo was elected to city commission. And then he became mayor pro tem, and then he ultimately ran for mayor. And he ran against Mayor Brand, and he defeated him. And so he was mayor for quite a while. Everything that was in the planning stages during Mayor Brand's tenure was actually built, pretty much built, through Mayor Montalvo's tenure. And in that time, we moved into single-member districts, which was an interesting time in itself, because that was a big change. That was a big change to have the city divided up that way and kind of restructured and getting to know people from in a very different way.
So besides Mayor Brand, was the rest of the commission pretty supportive of you?
Oh yes, yes. You couldn't stay there if they weren't. And that was really good. And that's one thing I think that, and I was single during that time. I was married in 1989. So I was single for a long time. I was involved with the Chamber of Commerce, and as I said, Leadership McAllen, Easter Seals of Community, a lot of things. And that's what I think that if someone, the young planners today, go into a small city or even a big city, become involved in the community, because that's your strategic base. You get, when you're trying to promote something and get involvement and get the stakeholders, you have to know who they are. And I don't want to say win them over, but at least have a relationship with them. And so all those folks that became council members, commissioners, I knew pretty much before they got there, just through community activities, community service, church, other school programs. And I think that's an important thing, to really, to be involved in your community. Not just because you're planning, and it's your town too. People always say, well, it's their town, but but you have to be mindful of that. That you're. I mean, why would you do something not? Why would you not do something good for where you are? And if you truly believe in that, then you're able to have others buy in and support that. I think there are a few times that, I mean, like the environmental, just throw that one away, and there were some other things. They escape me now, but I know there were some that came up and whoop, not time for that. Shelve that plan, and come back incrementally and put that forward. We did several updates of the comp plan, and we did a downtown plan. We did 4 or 5 downtown plans, but in the last update of the comp plan, we tried to update the zoning ordinance and come up with a new unified code. And we had consulting assistance for that, and it wasn't the right time. It was not the right time, and we had so much community opposition through organized opposition, the Builders Association, the banks, community. It was just like, let's don't do that way. Let's just, because we kept bringing them all in. We kept bringing them all in. We had big meetings. We had little meetings. But that was not. It wasn't to happen that way yet. And
so, having been there, I'm counting about 35 years.
35 years.
Mm-hmm. Some of the other staff members that you worked with that kind of stand out in your mind?
Well, I'm trying to
For that
think.
matter, how large is your staff now?
Oh. Well, we have 20 positions. We have only 16 filled right now. And we're in a new budget year, so hopefully we'll get those filled. But we've had people come and go. In fact, at the conferences, I see them every now and then. We sit down and I go, oh, look, I just love this. You got your ASCP and you work for me and you work for me and you work for me and you work for me. And I do think that's good, and that they've been in McAllen and moved on. But the staff that has been there the longest, Luis Mora, who's on staff, he interned. He was a Pan American University grad, and he interned with the city of McAllen, and then came on. He left a while, and then he came back to work there. Ed Taylor, you've probably seen a certified planner. He's, in fact, when I took that job in McAllen, it was Ed's job. He left and went to work for a consulting firm in Austin. And then after that, I want to say, well, I became planning director in 1987. I think it was 87. And long about that time, I was speaking at a conference at UT, and I ran into him, and he said, oh, he had a couple little kids, and he was thinking about moving back to the Valley. And I said, funny, you should say that. Your old job's open. So he came back to work with the city of McAllen, and he's been there as well ever since. So there's a core group of people that are there, and our city attorney now was assistant city attorney for quite some time. He's been there, I'm sure, 20 years. It's just been a good core group of folks.
And I think one of your ACMs is a planner.
She is a planner, yes, Michelle Leftwich. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And she's been on board with us, I want to say 3 years, but it could be just 2 right now. So it's good to have, and she's over development services, so it's good to have a planner who could advocate for the staff and give us guidance navigating through the politics sometimes that happens. But yeah.
So let's talk about APA. When did you first join APA and why?
Well, I was an intern. No, was I an intern? Yes, I was the intern with the city of FAR, and through that Pan American program, and we were involved with whatever organization. I think you said AIP, but I was not a member. That we participated with that, or ASPO, or whoever, ASPO, and then when I was in grad school is when APA formed. So that was probably 78, because I got a certificate in the mail that said I'd been a member a charter member. Yes, a charter member. So, but I joined. I said, hey, yeah, I think this is a good idea.
Okay.
So.
Did professors encourage that, or you just did that on your own?
Well, they made it available. I don't remember a lot of talk about it. I just thought it was, I mean, a professional organization. This could be good. This could be good.
So how did you first get involved in chapter activities? Through the section or education foundation?
Well, it was through the section because the southmost section's fairly large, and we had not too many people from the Rio Grande Valley, but there were a few folks from Kingsville and Corpus, and they would come to McAllen to have a meeting, and occasionally we would go to Corpus and have a meeting. But it was really after I found out about AICP, and I worked on that certification. And back in the day, it was different qualifications. I think you had to, if you had a master's in planning, you had to work for 5 years or something. And if you had a BA or a master's in something else, you had to work for longer than that before you could take the exam. I think that's different now. But I want to say maybe 83. I should look that up, but I think it was 83 or 4 when I took passed the exam, took the exam and passed it. And
where'd you take it at?
Austin.
Okay.
Austin.
And what was the exam like?
Wow. Well, I can tell you that story. I was so freaked the first 4 pages in the little book. Oh, no, I don't know anything. And I finally settled down to go, okay, I'll read this paragraph. And it was, there were paragraphs reading, there were some multiple choice things. And after, I don't even remember how long the test was, but it seemed like forever. And I think there maybe were only 3 or 4 of us left in the room by the time it was the end. And I went back to the first 4 pages and I went, oh gosh, I know the answer to that. But it was just the idea of, I don't know. It's a what? So yeah, that was a little scary. But after that, because I studied on my own for that, and then I took a class in Galveston. There was at the conference there was a prep class, and Ed Taylor was in my prep class, and he was working with a consulting firm in Austin at the time, and so we kind of renewed an acquaintance there as well. But yeah, but after that, I was like, oh well, how would you like to do this? And I became the professional development officer. And I was on the Education Foundation and setting up the short course stuff. And that's how I got to know Bob Wagner well, is because he would teach part of that. And there were several other folks that we would pull in. I think we got Terry Kahn one time to go to Arlington and teach the quantitative methods section of it. And then we got the idea that we could film that. So we videotaped it, and we made that on that VHS tape. And we made copies and sent them out to all the sections. We thought that was really cool. We were pioneering the first exam prep materials.
Other than Bob, any other people on the Education Foundation board that you remember?
No. Sorry.
No, that's
Sorry,
okay.
you guys. I don't. But also because where I was located, to go anywhere, I have to go 200 miles to get out of the valley, and most of that was held Austin, San Antonio, Arlington, occasionally. No, I don't think we ever went back to Galveston for that. But
and then after being PDO, did you get involved in section?
I did in the section. I was a section officer, a bunch of them, and then we had the conference in Corpus Christi. I worked on that when Henry Cisneros was our speaker. He was our keynote speaker, and that was pretty cool at the time. And then that year we decided to. That's all changed too, because we could bid on having the conference, and then we had to put it on ourselves. So we made money that year. We had exhibitors and we had equipment, kind of like TML, and we put them out in the parking lot at the hotel, and we made some money and we split it up.
You remember which hotel that was at?
No, no, I don't at all. But Oscar Quare was, I think he was section president at the time, and
Okay.
I was vice president. Betty Vriedevelt was, I want to say she might have been secretary. But, and I've lost touch with her, but she went to work in Austin. She had been in Harlingen for quite a while. And then she went to Austin, and I lost touch with her. But yeah, but that was a fun conference. And then years later, we held it on South Padre Island, and a lot of my staff worked on that, and we had a good turnout for that. I'm going to make a plug. We're trying to get the conference to come to McAllen. So now that we have the convention center that's been completed for several years, it's a beautiful facility, and we have 5 hotels that have been built around it on site, and really, really a great destination. So.
We used to have good times in the conferences in South Padre, going across the border and
right.
getting locked out at the gate for the international bridge.
To come out, dear. Yeah,
and
yeah.
passing pictures of margaritas around the van.
I don't remember any of that. Of course not.
And Craig singing.
Oh, Craig.
One Ton Tomato.
Oh, yes, Craig. I don't think Craig missed a one. But, and then, yeah, but I've been involved not as much in the last few years as I have been with APA prior to that, but I still participate in the section meetings, and I come to the conferences, and I think that's valuable. I have all my staff. I rotate that so that at least half my staff can attend the conferences, and the Planning and Zoning Commission, we've had our commissioners attend in the past. There's no one here this year for the conference in 2016, but next year I'm sure that we will have more participation.
Okay. And at some point in time, you were elected to the College of Fellows.
I was. That's a very wonderful honor. Mine was for professional practice, and it just trying to remember and put down everything that you've ever done that someone might think was worthy of that recognition or something that could be replicated. It was a very big honor, and the chapter supported me on that. Mike McAnally was a big help. Jean Lewis, I know. And I was really honored by that, and it's been a value, and it's been exciting, and it's evolved.
You remember what year that was?
You know,
what was the conference that was organized?
well, it was in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
The induction was in Washington, D.C., and at that point, I'm just thinking mentally, I don't really remember how many people there were, but there weren't very many women. And I think there are more women now who've been elected to the college than at the time. But 90, it's terrible not to know, but 94 maybe, 93, 95, 95, 6?
I think it was later than that. But,
earlier than that?
No, later than that.
Later than that? 98, 96, 98? Really? Well, I had little kids, so I'm going by that. My son is 21 now, so yeah.
Well, since you brought up the issue of gender, has that had played any role in your career? Have you had problems that you've run across, or dealing with developers? Or?
Well, I wouldn't say problems so much as I'm not an engineer. I have a master's in planning. I'm not an engineer. And there aren't, at the time there were no women engineers, but certainly there weren't women planners. I mean, what's that in our region? Statewide, it was different, but in our region, working with developers and builders and contractors and other design professionals was like, And you're going to tell me what, little lady? And so you adjust, because I had a friend who worked at the Chamber of Commerce who was a very good data person, excellent, very sharp, very knowledgeable, and she didn't have the same type of rapport with the business community or the developers. And I would just say, oh, well, thank you for opening that door for me. And, you know, it was just that time frame, the 80s, it was just a lot of feminism going around, and you could really just say, well, I was wondering if I could talk to you about this, instead of, here, I need to show you. You're not doing that right. It's just a different time and a different ability to communicate with people. And I think that came from maybe just being genuinely interested in what they had to say. It's like, well, I'm new here and I'm learning, and you've built 9 subdivisions, so why don't you tell me about that? And I think that's how, because some of those folks are still around today doing that. And I like to be a go-to person, and I like to be able to say, well, do you think if you did this differently, it would fit better? Because it would sure fit what we're trying to do over here with the rest of the city puzzle, if your piece fit like this. So.
Well, I kind of touched on some mentors of you. Can you think back of people who've played a big role in mentoring you over the years? Professors or staff people or other professionals?
Well, professors. Well, Terry Kahn, I think he would say, don't worry about that. You'll hire it when you become director. You'll hire somebody to do that. And then he'd laugh and say, no, you really need to figure it out. And so it was that kind of thing. First you go, oh, I'm off the hook. Oops, no, I'm not. And so that was, he was a big part in my thinking about how to approach things analytically. Alan Effersey, who worked at Friesen Nichols for a time and that worked on our project, he really was, he became a friend and mentor over the years, because there are political situations that come up and you want to talk to somebody who's not in your region, because everyone knows everyone in that location. And so I would call him and I'd say, oh, this happened, or I'd like to bounce this off you. And he would say, well, and don't do this. And Dick Lilly's another person. I got to know Dick, wow, maybe Austin? And I don't know, through APA over the years. And I would just, it wasn't like I called him a lot, but I would see him at a conference, or I would see him at a meeting, and I would say, how you doing? And I'd say, well, glad you asked me that question. This is happening in my life, and I just wondered, you know, if you have any advice for me. And he always had solid advice. So I always appreciated him a great deal.
Okay, the flip side of that question is, do you have any proteges, people that you have mentored over the years that have...
Wow. Well, one time I was at a conference with Mary Lou and Vernon Henry were seated at our table. And I happened to sit with them just to visit. And other people started sitting with us, and we went around the table, and she said, well, you know, who are you people? And they all said, well, I'm so-and-so, and I used to work for Julie. I'm so-and-so, I used to work for Julie. I'm so-and-so, I used to work for Julie. And I felt very proud of that, you know, that they had worked at the city of McAllen and worked in my department, and that I played some role in, like, sending them off to get certified. And she said, gosh, you just can't keep help, can you? And I said, oh, no, I didn't think of it that way. I was really proud of the fact that, you know, those folks had gone on. And I've seen a couple of them here. Susana Ramos, she worked in Harlingen, and then she worked, she's a UT grad. She is now in Bernie. I just saw her, and she said she moved from Laredo to Bernie. And Wow. Joe Khalifa interned with the city manager and came into the planning department, and he actually worked on the EDA project, the grant project, with me. And he has his certification, and he works with a consulting firm. I'm trying to think of who else was sitting around that table. No, can't think of the rest of them, but it was neat.
We've talked about APA, but are you involved in other organizations, either planning or not planning related?
Well, since I had children, I have a boy and a girl. My son's 21, he's a senior at UT San Antonio. My daughter's a freshman at A&M, chemical engineering major. But since I had children, I became involved in school organizations, and I've served for almost 8 years now on something called the School Health Advisory Council. And that has to do with health, the President's Let's Move campaign, and good food, eating well, exercise, Easter seals. I've been involved as a volunteer for Easter seals since college, and I served as president of the Easter Seals organization in the Valley. Leadership McAllen is still going on. I still show up for them every now and then. So, yeah, my church.
Okay. Well, and this may play into that. You kept up your interest in music and singing?
I have, but my daughter played the flute in band. And I think that she picked the flute probably because I said, here's some flutes. Do you think you might want to play the flute? And but she did, and she plays very well, and she was drum major for the high school band. So something I didn't do. I think I had to sit out a couple of games because they were like, you don't march right. But I've kept up singing. I don't play an instrument anymore. And
sing with the church choir or something?
I haven't for a long time. No, I haven't. But every now and then every now and then the city taps me to sing the national anthem. So at some event. So I keep that going. But I enjoy that.
And you earlier on talked about some advice to young planners. Is there anything else that you would advise somebody coming right out of school?
Well, I think working in a small city, you get to do and learn so many things. I mean, McAllen, compared to San Antonio or Austin or Denton even, it can be considered a small city. When I started there, it was 66,000 population. And now it's almost 140, which doesn't sound like big, but it commands a bigger market area, and we have 5 different school districts in our jurisdiction, and we own the city owns 2 bridges and an airport, international airport, and so, I mean, who else would send you to Columbia to make a speech about international development? It's just lots of opportunities. I think if you're willing to say, yes, I'll do that. And I think maybe another piece of advice would be, what if? Say, what if we did this? What if we tried that? Because so often people just don't. They go with whatever is laid out and just start saying, what if? What if we could do this? What if we could do this? Because the housing program, we did housing rehabilitation for elderly people at Amigos del Valle, which became a housing homes for elderly people. And in McAllen, the same thing. We're fixing up houses, now we're building houses, now we're building subdivisions. So it just starts with a little seed, and you can be the catalyst for that. And just keep going. Another thing would be maybe just like you said, well, I've been there a long time, and I know that other people maybe in the field have gone into consulting. I did that for like 6 months, and I went, I don't like this. I did a zoning ordinance for a city. But bloom where you're planted. If you're involved and you're effective there, and you can do what you can do, and you can learn more and do more and pull more people in, and you can get things done through others because you can teach them, draw them in, inspire them. That's an amazing opportunity. It's fun. It's fun.
Well, we've covered a lot of territory. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to talk about?
Oh, gosh. Probably. I don't know.
Okay, that's
I
fine.
can't think of anything at the moment because it's an honor to be asked to share some history of my involvement in planning, and thinking about it is like kind of like drinking from the fire hose. Like, oh, the ideas that come into your head of what you want to say and that you might want your legacy to be if you're going to talk to somebody about it. I tell my son things because he's very interested in government and urban studies, but he's more interested in law. And I tell him, well, okay, land use law, you can do that. You know, a lot of people, Alan Taylor did that. He was somebody I worked for when I interned. So there's a lot of opportunities out there that we wouldn't have thought years ago. And so professional planners are needed, and they have the opportunity to bridge gaps between and among all the professions and just people's ideas. So I would say that. Bloom where you're planted.
Well, I think the honor of this is ours, and so I want to thank you for spending some time with us.
Well, thank you very much.